Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here with you today, and I hope that we'll have an enjoyable and productive experience today. It's not going to be a political speech. You know, a political speech are like huge steer horns. A point here and a point there and a lot of bull in between. So you're not going to have to endure that this morning. My goodness, the good work that you folks do, the benefit to the citizens of North Carolina, to the nation, to future generations. Thank you for what you do. I have been a fan for many years of several of the institutions associated with this and other organizations like this that have, in my opinion, the best interest of the future of our children, and particularly my grandchildren, at heart. I've met a lot of good people in the General Assembly. Jackson Stansel, for one, and Steve Herring with the Goldsboro News Argus from down. And I see people in here that I've talked to, but all of you need to understand that I care very little about you compared to what I do about my grandchildren. I do represent House District 4. I've been a farmer for 41 years. I'm proud of the fact that I beat Moses. Moses was in the wilderness only 40 years, and I grew heavy tom turkeys for 41 years. Maybe I'll be able not just to see the promised land, but enter it one day. I played football at Wake Forest. I graduated in 1969. In the event that there are any Carolina fans in the room, Wake Forest beat Carolina 3 years in a row while I was there. We were fortunate enough to block a Danny Talbot field goal in Chapel Hill to win that game 3-0. I won't tell you what year that was. But I have been a vegetable and a turkey farmer. I had some interesting experiences at Wake Forest. I'd been told that it was difficult. You know, when I went to Wake Forest, the girls, the females who entered Wake Forest, they had to score 9,000 on the SAT to get in. And so I knew I was behind, so I decided, I learned about quality points and that you had to have a certain number of quality points in relationship to your hours. So I decided to take public speaking. I mean, I'd been speaking for 18 years, so I didn't see any problem with that. So I sashayed into the class and started out, and the professor introduced me to, and the rest of the class, to extemporaneous speeches that were the last 2.5 minutes. Well, I found out what extemporaneous meant when I saw what the other kids did. They get up and just talk. So I got up and gave my 2.5 minute extemporaneous talk, and it was good. And I walked by the professor, and he said, Mr. Dixon, he said, could you stop by and see me for a few moments after class? I said, I got this one nailed. So I stopped by and went by to see him, and he sat me down, and very tenderly and kindly, he said, Mr. Dixon, he said, you might want to consider dropping this course. Well, that deflated me a little bit. And then he went on to explain. He said, you have mispronounced more words in 2.5 minutes than I have ever heard anybody who attempted to speak the English language. And Becky, much to my surprise, in those hallowed halls of wisdom, those people didn't know what young'uns were. They had no ideas what little biddies were, or britches, or backer, or this or that. And so I set out to learn those people something. I think I made an A in the course. Fortunately, over the years, I've been very blessed to be able to teach school, to farm, and to interact with people in all stations of life. And I've come to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that none of us are any more than Balaam's donkey without the inspiration of heaven. If you don't know the story about Balaam's donkey, you need to read it. Our forefathers worked long and hard to make America great. They believed in hard work and provident living. And many lived by the old pioneer slogan, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That's something that government does not understand today. Let me repeat that. Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That was the philosophy that my grandmother used. And she worked hard to send this grandson off to school. In many ways, we've become a wasteful and unthankful society. Our agriculture heritage is threatened by many who think food comes from the grocery store. Liberal politicians pander those who would destroy our Christian beliefs relative to marriage and the family. Additionally, liberal taxation and excessive government are the enemies to freedom and liberty because they destroy jobs. It says in the introduction that some of you received that I would discuss the impact and contributions of farmers to our state and my commitment to promoting agriculture and the needs of my fellow farmers. I would review with you the mission of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture under the lead of the greatest Commissioner of Agriculture in the nation, Commissioner Steve Troxler. Their mission is to provide services that promote and improve agriculture, agribusiness, and forest products, to protect consumers and businesses, and conserve farmland and natural resources for the prosperity of all North Carolinians. A very worthy mission. I'm going to run through some boring statistics now to get to the good part of my talk. There are 48,200 farm operations in North Carolina. We farm 8.2 million acres. The average farm size is 171 acres. The characteristics of farmers, there's 43,765 males, 6,453 females, and the average age of the farmer in North Carolina today is 58.9 years old. The market value of agricultural products totals $12.6 billion. That puts us 8th in the nation. The crop part of that is $4.3 billion. That places us 18th in the nation. The livestock is $8.3 billion, or 6th in the nation. The top crops in acres, 1.6 million acres of soybeans, 15th in the nation. 830,000 acres of corn, 18th in the nation. 754,000 acres of wheat, 13th in the nation. Forage and hay, 643,000 acres, 28th in the nation. 52,000 acres of vegetables, and I don't know where that puts us, probably 50th. Livestock numbers in North Carolina, 148.3 million chickens, 19.4 million layers, 17.2 million turkeys, and I grew 700,000 of those a year for a while. Heavy tom turkeys. We would take those boogers from 1 day old and sell them at 40 pounds in 22 weeks. That's putting meat, high protein, available for the American people. 8.9 million hogs, 875,000 cows, 56,000 goats, 30,000 sheep, 965 million pounds of milk. That's 21,000 pounds of milk per cow. Pretty good production. The U.S. rankings, tobacco we're first, sweet potatoes we're first, poultry we're second, hogs we're second, trout. You didn't expect me to say that, did you? Number 2 in the nation in trout production here in North Carolina. Turkey is number 2. 18.6 million acres of forest land, 14.4 billion trees in North Carolina. Now you know something that you didn't know when you got here, and you'll remember that. 14.4 billion trees in the state of North Carolina. The total value of agriculture and agribusiness is $84 billion and growing. Agriculture grew during the Great Recession. It's the only sector of our economy that actually showed positive gains during the Great Recession. Now I want to shift from the stats that are so boring and are easy enough for you to find with the click of a mouse. Let me take you back to 1859 and the opening of the Wisconsin State Agriculture Fair by the soon-to-be President Abraham Lincoln. He prefaced his remarks, or began his remarks by saying, "I presume I'm not expected to employ the time assigned to me in the mere flattery of farmers as a class. I believe that there are really more attempts at flattering them than any other, the reason of which I cannot perceive unless it is that they can cast the most votes." Wow. Times have changed. He goes on to say, but farmers being the most numerous class, it follows that their interest is the largest interest. It also follows that that interest is most worthy of all to be cherished and cultivated, and that if there be inevitable conflict between that interest and any other, that other should yield. And I will refer to that again a little later on. This leads to further reflection that no other human occupations open so wide a field for the profitable and agreeable combination of labor with cultivated thought as agriculture. Every blade of grass is a study, and here's the pearl of great price. And to produce two where there was but one is both a profit and a pleasure. And not grass alone, but soil, seeds, hog, horses, cattle, sheep, goats, poultry, trees, shrubs, fruits, plants, and flowers. The 1,000 things of which these are specimens, each a world of study within itself. We no longer cast the most votes, ladies and gentlemen, but there's one thing that we still do, and that is that we still feed everybody that does vote. We must promote. As I mentioned a while ago, Lincoln was prophetic when he said that when the interest of farming and agriculture comes into contention with other interests, if we are smart, we will do that which will allow the other interests to yield so that we can continue to properly feed and clothe America. I used the phrase earlier, and I've used this for about a decade. And I believe it strongly, John. I believe that of necessity, those of us in industry and government and every level of activity in the state should, for our own well-being and the future well-being of our children and grandchildren, find any occasion that we can to give agriculture properly measured priority. Government and regulations are one of the biggest challenges that farmers and any other business group has. When government moves the goal lines, it's very difficult for us to deal with. We did one thing in North Carolina that I hope one day we can do at the national level. In North Carolina, we alleviated the inheritance tax. There's no other group that stands to benefit more than the remaining family of those who worked hard, sometimes for 3 or 4 generations, to scratch out a living from the earth. And with land values now, it doesn't take long before you are a multi-millionaire as a farmer with land assets. But there's not many calories in dirt. I would encourage you to go back and read, and many of you in this room will be familiar with it, Paul Harvey's great God Made a Farmer. I'm not going to take time to review that with you because when I do, I get emotional. It's one of the great deliveries of anything that's ever been given in this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, why do farmers farm? With all the economic adversities and frustrations and difficulties, do we realize that the weather is the only constant that we face? Is that surprising for you to hear me say that? And of course, I will copy Commissioner Troxler. The weather is always constant because it's always too hot, too cold, too wet, or too dry. We automatically know that. So why do we farm? You can examine it from one end to the other. You can read Wendell Berry bringing it to the table in several instances. But the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, is that we farm because we love it. We farm because we have a connection to the earth. We love to watch plants grow. We love to be in the presence of animals. We love to work outdoors. We love to live and work where we live. We like to do it with our children. We love the independence that we have. The soil is the great connector of our lives, the source and destination of us all. It is the healer and restorer and resurrector. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life. Good farmers who take seriously their duties as stewards of creation and are the land's best inheritors contribute to the welfare of society in more ways than society today understands, or acknowledges, or even attempts to understand, or even attempts to acknowledge. These farmers produce valuable goods, of course, but they also conserve soil, they conserve water, they conserve wildlife, they conserve open space, they conserve scenery. Why? Because it is in our best interest. It is the source from which we earn our living. Here's a phrase that farmers know all too much about. There's no such thing as finished. Work comes in a stream and has no end. There are only things that must be done now and things that can be done a little bit later. Nowadays, agriculture must mediate between nature and the human community, with ties and obligations in both directions. To farm well requires an elaborate courtesy toward all creatures, animate and inanimate. Serious challenges are facing our farmers today. Special interest groups who may know just enough about the reality of farming to think that Cheerios are donut seed. They use the word sustainability and attack many of our tried and proven methods that allow us to continue to produce two where there was but one, on less land, with fewer farmers, under more regulations, under increasingly difficult weather situations. These people who are enemies to agriculture, their plows, combines, cultivators, and work boots are nothing more than their pens and keyboards 1,000 miles from any farm, where they spew out their misguided opinions through liberal media and hateful social media sites while having their stomachs comfortably full on high-quality food at a very economical cost produced by dedicated farmers across this state and nation. We must never stop. We must never stop in thinking about the fact that food does not come from a grocery store. The food and fiber they and most of us enjoy come from the efforts of hard-working men and women who have worked hard over more than a few years to produce enough food for themselves and with enough to spare to feed today 200 additional people. When Abraham Lincoln made his talk, one farmer took care of his family and 7 more people. Talk about sustainability. Father Adam and Mother Eve, when they were cast out of the Garden of Eden, became the earth's first farmers. That was 6,000 years ago. Farming has been pretty sustainable. This earth was created with enough and to spare. Our modern-day farmers have developed tried and proven methods to feed a hungry world. We have become better stewards of the land and environment while at the same time providing high-quality and economical food. It has not been easy. It has been very hard on many occasions for many farmers. When I was a little boy, I had an uncle that showed me an old sign dangling on a rusty barbed wire fence of a man who had held on more than a few times to keep his family farm for his children and grandchildren. And that sign said, burned out by drought, drowned out by flood waters, ate out by jackrabbits, sold out by sheriff, still here. And that's the case with a lot of our family farmers around. There are many reasons, ladies and gentlemen, why we are a free nation, but perhaps all of them together do not equal the fact that we have been able to feed ourselves. The most important energy we produce today is called food. Question: how long has it been since anyone in this room has seriously worried about whether you would have any food to eat tomorrow? Very few of us. That's a blessing and a danger. What happens to the bread and milk on the shelf when Greg Fishel says something about a flake or two of snow or a little bit of ice? You better be in a hurry or you'll miss out.